Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we explore how work is transforming one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we're asking a hard question. What happens when young people enter the workforce and find only closed doors? The latest McKinsey Goodwill survey paints a sobering picture. Youth unemployment is 2.5 times higher than the general population. Half of the young job seekers say they lack experience or credentials to even compete in the entry-level job level. And 1 in 5 doesn't know where to look for jobs. Nearly 1 in 3 doubt they'll ever retire. Yet, despite all of this, Gen Z remains the most motivated generation to learn, train, and adapt. And that's where today's conversation lands, in the gap between barriers on the one side and potential on the other. My guest today is Steve Preston, President and CEO of Goodwill Industries International. Goodwill has spent over a century helping people build skills, find opportunities, and connect with employers. And now it's stepping into the future with initiatives that prepare the next generation for the economy that's coming. Steve, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. And we should start with that data. The McKinsey Goodwill survey shows young people entering the workforce are more pessimistic than ever. High unemployment, lack of skills, fear about stability. Do they have a reason to be?
Well, I think the data are very concerning. I mean, youth unemployment, as you mentioned, is much higher. The most recent BLS data shows that it's almost 3 times as high as broader unemployment. And then when you look at people without college degrees, there was a study done by the BLS late last year that showed that people in that age range, 18 to 24, without college degrees, had over 20% unemployment. So it's very concerning right now. And it's happening also at a time when the economy is changing rapidly, skills demands are changing rapidly. And so many of the people that we serve, you know, are sort of feel like they're on the outside looking in, right? They see all this stuff happening. They want to learn. They want to have opportunities. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to find them. And it's very frustrating for them. And at the same time, when you look at young people who are looking at the real estate market, when they're looking at where they are financially, their hope kind of for the future is significantly diminished.
Yeah, I mean, they clearly need to work. That's not even a question. I think maybe I want to ask you, what do you think the barriers to entry are for the non-college degree market, right?
Well, there are a few barriers to entry. Many people tell us this is not youth and also people that are older tell us that they look for jobs, they see opportunities, but they either don't apply for them or they apply and aren't chosen because they specifically do not have the skills needed for that particular
Which
job.
are, what kind of
Which,
skills?
well, it depends on the particular
Yeah,
job. But so, for
obviously.
example, a certain level of digital foundations is critical for almost any role anymore. Right. And so sometimes we think people think they've got great digital skills because they can use the apps on their phone. But then when you go into a work environment and you have different types of tools, when you need to be able to use applications in that particular workforce, in that workplace, they're not effective. In some cases, they may have very specific skills with respect to trades or other occupations that require something very specific, like a maintenance job. And so they see those skill requirements. They know they don't have them. But the other thing is, they tell us that they don't know how to get them. They tell us they don't know where to go because many of these people aren't kids that are going to college or have access to those pathways. They're also people who
Okay,
often.
hold on. So I'm going to just pause here for a second because
Right.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, okay, and I know it's an unfair thought, right? By thinking, okay, if there's a trade, forget college for a second. And we can talk about even people in college these days are having trouble
They
finding jobs.
are.
They leave them.
Yeah.
But let's put that aside because I've also heard um, people say actually it's even easier to find today jobs when you have trades skills versus college education. So they didn't go to college, but they're interested in a trades role or production or something of those. Why can't they go take the I don't know what the word is. It's not education, but it's the skilling that the path that's required to gain those skills.
Well, if people are skilled for trades jobs, there are a lot of opportunities. Now, as we all know, we've sort of had a love affair with a college degree for many years in our country, but many of these trade roles pay well, offer good growth pathways, and very good benefits and stable jobs. So people who do avail themselves of those skills are effective, and we see that all the time because we have programs throughout Goodwill that train people on basic trade skills. We've got a program in place right now that's focused on green economy trade skills, heat pump maintenance, charging station maintenance, solar panel maintenance. And we're seeing people go from unemployed with no credentials to a job in those occupations in 8 weeks. And then once they get those jobs, they're not full electricians. Obviously, they don't have but the pathways for their growth are significant. So often, Nirit, it's figuring out how to avail yourself of those training programs and get the support to not only get trained but find that pathway to the new job.
Okay, so this is why I wanna stay with this because I could think what I'm trying to figure out is where's the problem? Is it employers not looking at potential of the people who can actually be trained? Or is it the people not having access to the
Yeah.
training or not knowing about them or not enough of those training pathways?
Yeah. So a big part of the problem uh, is just sort of this gap that we're not connecting. We have employers saying, I want people with the skills and I don't know where to find them. And we have people saying, I want to acquire the skills and get those jobs, but I don't know what the pathway is. And so there is a big access issue that is really that's a strong impediment for the worker, right?
Okay.
They don't know where to go for help. In many cases, they don't really know what they need. It's not so many of the people we serve, most of the people, the vast majority of the people we serve don't have a high school degree or less. So many of these people don't aren't looking at the community college or don't understand many of these pathways because they don't maybe have networks or people in their families that have gone down those paths.
So
So
what's the
they need
role
to
of
be
educators or policymakers or I mean
ex-
who needs to step in here?
well, certainly educators do, because right now, if we're talking about the 18 to 24-year-olds, there's both an issue in the education system, but there's also an issue in connecting them beyond that, right? So it's really important for people to find people like us, because when they come to us, we say, what are your dreams? Let's do a big assessment on your skills, on whether or not you're ready for a new job, on what it's going to take. And let's work with you over the next period of time to get skills, to become job ready, to do resume preparation, and to find a job. So for the people we see, it is skills, but it's also helping them along that pathway. And it does not take that much for many people to go from 0 to 60 with the right kind of support. On the employer side, there's a gap, there's a lack of talent that they need. And so if we can train those people and make the connection to employers, which we do, that begins to open up those pathways. And we see that all the time. That's what we see every day in our world. Now,
Yeah.
you asked about employers.
Yeah,
Let me just
before
make,
actually, I was
okay.
gonna go there because my that's where my head was going, right? I'm thinking, okay, but employers are complaining they don't have enough talent. And it's interesting because they're looking for ready-made, skilled, talent that comes in exactly with what they're used to, they need and they're used to hiring. And you're actually telling them you've got untapped talent pools here that are potentially ready for what you need, but they don't come ready made. What would you have them know?
Not all employers are in the same position. So a lot of employers are investing heavily in looking for non-traditional employees to fill the ranks. And what we're hearing from them is they're reporting much higher number of their jobs are filled, fewer, talent challenges because they've opened up the aperture on whom they're willing to hire. Now you have everything from that young person who didn't go to school, but they're getting the skills they need and they move in, and that tends to be a little bit less challenging. But then you have people who have been in low wage jobs for many years and have never broken out. You have people who may have a history of incarceration or long gaps in employment, and those tend to be pools of people that many employers are less likely to look at. Many of their screening practices, screen those types of people out automatically, but based on those indicators. So they're immediately taken out of the potential talent pool by many employers. For those employers who don't do that, we think that they find rich talent. And in fact, many employers, just as one example, many employers who hire second chance individuals report that those people are as good or better employees than the rest of their population for many reasons. So,
So can you, I'm
yeah.
thinking what maybe an example would be great. So if you have, some interesting examples of the kinds of people that, or the kinds of processes and programs that employers can actually use to expand the talent pool and then bring in people that they don't usually look at.
Yeah. So first of all, they need to think differently about where they look, right? So if they come to people like Goodwill, we will have we'll have a talent pool that we're training that we can work with them. So many employers are looking for people the same old way. They're looking through the same channels. They have the same algorithms. They do the same thing, and they're going to need to open up the aperture and begin saying, no, we're going to begin looking at people from these alternative from these other pools that we haven't traditionally looked at. Number one. Number two is the employers that do this well understand that we don't all look and sound the same. Right. So I, I, just sort of jokingly, I know of a small consulting firm that I'm familiar with, and literally 90% of the people like went to a Big Ten school and all look the same, right? Why is that? Because they all have the same stories and they feel comfortable with each other. Well, somebody comes across your desk and they've spent 6 years in prison and they had a conviction, and all of a sudden you're not really sure what to make of this person. You may not know how to interview them. It's somebody who falls into sort of a different lane of needs. That kind of upsets the apple cart a bit on the recruiting process. So you have to be able to enter the conversation and be able to evaluate people well. I'll tell you, one population, and this was more of an issue a number of years ago when we had a lot of veterans coming back, but it was really hard for a lot of veterans to get jobs because they had this incredible experience, but they didn't know how to translate it into a different context. And one of the things we work very hard to do is to say, look at these incredible skills, capabilities you've built. Let's talk about how to describe them and connect them to the needs of the employer.
Yeah, that's a really, really good example. I keep thinking we talk a lot about needing to hire for skills and potential and not necessarily for past experience that looks exactly the same. We also don't know how to do that. I think we're talking about this for a few years, and you're taking us to the extreme cases, right?
Yeah.
But the veterans is a really good example because people who've served, right? They have leadership experience, they have working under stress experience, they have teamwork experience, and they have experienced a lot of the things that we need in organizations. But it doesn't look and sound like a CV that you would, a resume that you normally screen. And it's almost like we're expecting them to do the translation. And I'm hearing you say, employers need to wake up and figure out how to do the translation themselves.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. The other thing about veterans is they get thrown into situations at a very young age and get responsibilities at a very young age that are really valuable that many people in the private sector don't have. But yeah, I think for employers to do this well, they have to think differently about who they're bringing in the organization, and in doing that, they have to understand what that means for how they seek people, how they interview them, how they engage with them to really understand whether the dots really connect.
Yeah, I mean, there's more downstream implications. I mean, we haven't, we've been talking for a while and we haven't said AI yet. But if you think about where a lot of this is going, right? Technology, whether it's hands, right, as in technology that replaces things we do, or minds, which is more the AI, um, is stepping in to take over or redefine a lot of the work. And right now, we're hearing leaders very clearly say we're pausing, especially on entry level jobs, but not only, until we figure out what to do with that. And I can't shake the statement that you said before about how people are coming out of school, but they don't even have the capacity to properly work in the digital environment in an organization, which isn't apps on your phone. So, how do we close that gap?
Yeah. So the digital, the onslaught of AI has a lot of implications for the workforce and for low wage workers. I think for the workforce, and a lot of this is going to take time to pan out. But when you when you look at entry level roles for people coming out of college, a lot of the kind of the entry level functions that many of those people performed are the things that are kind of going away. Like you don't need people doing a lot of data entry in spreadsheets. You don't need people doing a lot of, if you're a new attorney, you might not need to do the kind of, heavy duty research because you've got tools to be able to aggregate a lot of, the relevant cases and those types of things for you. So for that entry level worker, um, a lot of those skills are, I wouldn't even say devalued. I'd say some of those are kind of being replaced, and those people are going to need to be able to perform very quickly, leveraging tools effectively to in those roles, and that's hard. That's hard because it's a whole new things, and it's hard, and employers are going through the transition to figure out what that means for how they hire. I'll also tell you, colleges and universities are in a real are in a situation where they're really trying hard to figure this out because they want to teach critical thinking, they want to teach all these great things, but they also know when people leave college, employers value AI skills, and there's this real pull and tug for how do we ensure that we teach fundamentals to young people when those fundamentals might be important, but they're not as connected to the specific job skills that they're
E
going into.
Exactly, so they
It's very
become like,
complicated.
yeah, they become like basic, right? I mean, AI skills training or critical thinking with AI or the ability to work with technology is fundamental these days.
It
Honest,
is, yeah.
whether you're an auto mechanic or, a welder, it's fundamental.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, uh, but in any case, I do think going into those professions, and then even in mid level jobs, sort of the hollowing out of a lot of those functions is occurring. And most people would say it's not just entire jobs going away that are being replaced, but it's portions of jobs. And as a
Yes.
result, you're going to consolidate labor, and you're going to have fewer people doing being able to cover a broader scan. So, making sure that people are tooled with those foundational AI skills to be able to move into those roles and up through organization is critical because employers are looking for it.
Yeah,
The
but
other
but I'm
thing,
I'm trying to think about the population that we talked about this entire
yeah,
conversation, which is not the college,
right,
kids, right? We talked about the people who are, coming out of high school, going into looking for jobs, and we wanna make sure they don't get locked out of an AI economy or a creator economy, and I'm trying to figure out what's missing for that to
yeah.
happen.
So I think what's going to happen here for those young people, and then for some of the other challenge populations that we talked about, I think we may see sort of a bifurcation. It will be, I think it's actually going to be easier to learn a lot of those skills with AI. You can imagine people who may not have deep financial tools, but through an understanding of AI, be able to provide, prepare dashboards or graphics or whatever, because you're connecting data and things, and you're saying, "I want X, Y, and Z," and all of a sudden it presents itself. So there are things where, like, the deep underlying knowledge may be less necessary than the tool to create the output. And having those basic AI skills may be a great leveler. I actually think it may actually be beneficial for older workers who just many of those people have not learned technology to the degree that the younger population has, but it's easier to bridge once you learn how to use AI tools.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, I've written about this recently, the idea that we're starting to talk using voice AI and then it becomes ambient, that it's just there and, you talk to the digital world and it answers back.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking about education when it stops becoming a 5-digit college um, tuition and becomes a conversation, here's a washing machine that's making noise. I'm taking a picture. Can you show me how to fix this? And then tomorrow suddenly I can fix washing machines, right? So there's a whole potential there. And I'm asking myself, is there something we need to do to make sure that that they're able to avail themselves of the potential?
absolutely. So, number one is I do believe that colleges and high schools, I think very specifically high schools, need to figure out how to manage this pull and tug between making sure that people have critical thinking skills, foundations, et cetera, but then understand how to apply them in an AI world. And we have to figure that out very quickly. So that's very important. The other thing, and you touched on this a little bit with your analogy about fixing, the wash machine or whatever, is AI tools can help many of the populations we serve in ways that we haven't thought about before. AI can, through engagement with AI over time, we can evaluate what a person's needs are much more efficiently in terms of skill requirements, in terms of human service needs, maybe somebody's housing insecure or whatever. We can use AI tools, and people are working on these technologies now to automatically connect them with providers of support. You may be taking a class in digital skills and get 5 problems wrong, and AI comes back and says, I see you did these 5 problems. Jump into this module over here, retake the class, now see if you can get through it.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we're testing AI tools to help people in the process of preparing for and applying for jobs with resume preparation and interview skills. We've tested VR technologies to simulate interviews. So,
Yeah.
so a lot of these access pathways and support pathways for people who need the help moving forward are being developed rapidly. And I think for people who connect with them, if we can get them connected, and that's our goal, we want to be part of connecting people in need with the support to move them forward. Those people, I think, will be able to break out of that low wage cycle. Those people will be able to break through many of the challenges and limitations they've had historically.
Yeah, because I'd
However,
like to think that the new world of work, there are less gatekeepers that you have to get through. There are less boxes you have to fit into, which should allow people to figure out ways to break through where they couldn't before.
well, I think, and I'll tell you, just in the nonprofit world and in the foundation world, there is a massive amount of energy and investment going specifically into developing AI capabilities and training platforms and networks that will help people move out of poverty and into much more sustainable, gainful employment.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. And it's just remarkable what we're seeing being developed.
And I think, I maybe because you've led, in government and business and now in the nonprofit sector, from your perspective, I always want to say, if you had a magic wand, right? What would be that one ask or one thing that you would change at a system level to help this along?
Well, yeah, in an aspirational world, I would want every individual to know what's possible in their lives and what the pathway is to achieve that. Okay. And then have access to that pathway. And there are all kinds of disconnects in there. And if we could solve those, we would see a lot more people moving into much better situations in life. And we would see a lot more employers filling strategic roles, which they need to compete in a global economy.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
exists. We have untapped talent. We need to develop that talent. And we have unfilled needs. So, yeah, my magic wand would be make sure everybody knows what's possible and help them get it.
That's a great one. In fact, I really hope. I mean, if we've been on this path for a decade, where we see a lot of micro economy, a lot of independent economy, a lot of people being able to exchange value without the structures of the past. You know, of the job,
Mhm.
of the full time job, of the education, of the resume. And if we can figure out a way to broaden that opportunity, and that should work. So, Steve, I always end with a question versus an answer, right? So I'd actually like to ask you, what's the one question you think we should all be asking about the future of work?
Yeah, wow, that is a great question. I think the question we should be asking about the future of work, and this is very much driven by, um, what I believe in life and what I'm trying to do in this role. The question I'd ask is, how do we make the future of work work for everybody? How do we make sure the future of work provides pathways to what we've long called the American dream, where everybody can participate? And I truly believe that that is possible, and it doesn't, require a massive amount of spending or a massive amount. It really does require a lot of smart policies, a lot of support for providers, and a lot of engagement by employers.
Okay, that's a fabulous vision to end with. So thank you, Steve, for joining me today. For more about Steve and Goodwill Industries International, check out the links in the podcast description. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow The Future of Less Work wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, future of work should be a win-win between people and organizations. Your best people do not work because you measure them on it or because you tell them to. They work because by working for you, they also achieve what's important to them in life. Till next
Mm.
time.